The undeniably big topics, the ones that will define our future, get virtually no discussion at all. War, civil liberties, emerging science, demographic change, corporate power, natural resources. Debates like that are not permitted in American media. Both political parties and their donors have reached consensus on what benefits them, and they actively collude to shut down any conversation about it. One of the main problems with the US government is that there's no way to know exactly what it's doing because you're not allowed to know. More than 1 billion federal documents, 1 billion, have been declared classified, and that means they're off limits to you and all other ordinary American citizens who don't work for the government. You're not allowed to see them despite the fact they belong to you. One of the first things you realize when you step outside the noise for a few days is how many genuinely nice people there are in this country. Kind and decent people, people who really care about what's true, and a bunch of hilarious people also, a lot of those. It's got to be the majority of the population, even now. So that's heartening. The other thing you notice when you take a little time off is how unbelievably stupid most of the debates you see on television are. They're completely irrelevant. They mean nothing. In 5 years, we won't even remember that we had them. Trust me, as someone who's participated. And yet at the same time, and this is the amazing thing, the undeniably big topics, the ones that will define our future, get virtually no discussion at all. War, civil liberties, emerging science, demographic change, corporate power, natural resources. When was the last time you heard a legitimate debate about any of those issues? It's been a long time. Debates like that are not permitted in American media. Both political parties and their donors have reached consensus on what benefits them, and they actively collude to shut down any conversation about it. After 2 full years, after a highly publicized and highly politicized congressional committee, after endless grandstanding in the media, after unprecedented political crackdowns, after nearly 1,000 arrests, after all of that, Americans, yes, they do have a right to know what actually happened on January 6th. That's what Kevin McCarthy said. Who could argue otherwise? What's the counter-argument? Well, there is one, and Democrats have been making it in court, and that's why the footage from that day is still hidden. Here's an actual quote from an actual brief filed in an actual federal court by an actual left-wing U.S. attorney called Channing Phillips. Quote, "National security interests could be harmed by the disclosure of the sealed CCTV videos from the Capitol. Once the capabilities of a U.S. Capitol interior surveillance camera, including its position and whether it pans, tilts, or zooms, is disclosed to the public via the release of a single video from that camera, the cat is out of the bag." So that's it right there. You can't know whether the Capitol's surveillance cameras pan, tilt, or zoom. And if you do know, America is in peril. A lot of information just is not available. I mean, because it's digital and it's controlled by a small number of companies, the polling suggests that a lot of Americans, I don't mean like hundreds, I mean hundreds of millions of Americans, have no idea what's going. They don't know the facts about certain things. That it's not just because they're dumb or they're distracted. So that challenges the idea of democracy, which, rests on the notion of an informed voting public, of a citizenry. And we don't have that. Suddenly, the United States looks very much like a one-party state. That's a depressing realization, but it's not permanent. Our current orthodoxies won't last. They're brain dead. Nobody actually believes them. Hardly anyone's life is improved by them. This moment is too inherently ridiculous to continue, and so it won't. The people in charge know this. That's why they're hysterical and aggressive. They're afraid. They've given up persuasion. They're resorting to force. But it won't work. When honest people say what's true, calmly and without embarrassment, they become powerful. At the same time, the liars who've been trying to silence them shrink, and they become weaker. That's the iron law of the universe. True things prevail. Where can you still find Americans saying true things? There aren't many places left, but there are some, and that's enough. As long as you can hear the words, there is hope. Every human movement in the United States Capitol is recorded by cameras, and you already knew that because the same is true in virtually every public building in the Western Hemisphere. That is not a secret. And of course, it's not the secret the Democrats fear you might learn if you saw the tape. They're probably a lot more concerned about whether you'll discover how many law enforcement agents actively helped. Well, that's just completely outrageous. First, it seems very obvious the FBI did have confidential sources dressed as Trump supporters inside the Capitol. But the fact is, we as Americans have an absolute right to know. There's no good reason. FBI Director Christopher Wray wants to keep the surveillance footage hidden so we can't know.
I'm just noting what's super obvious. Like, those of us who are in our mid-50s are caught in the past in the way that we think about this. One side's like, no, I've got this idea, and we've got this idea, and let's have a debate about our ideas. They don't want a debate. Those ideas won't produce outcomes that any rational person would want under any circumstances. Those are manifestations of some larger force acting upon us. It's just so obvious. It's completely obvious. And I think two things. One, we should say that and stop engaging in these totally fraudulent debates where we are using the terms that we used in 1991 when I started at Heritage, as if maybe, I could just win the debate if I marshaled more facts. I've tried that, doesn't work. And two, maybe we should all take just like 10 minutes a day to say a prayer about it. I'm serious. Like, why not? And I'm saying that to you, not as some kind of evangelist. I'm literally saying that to you as an Episcopalian, the Samaritans of our time. I'm coming to you from the most humble and lowly theological position you can. I'm literally an Episcopalian, okay?
One of the main problems with the U.S. government is that there's no way to know exactly what it's doing because you're not allowed to know. More than 1 billion federal documents, 1 billion, have been declared classified, and that means they're off limits to you and all other ordinary American citizens who don't work for the government. You're not allowed to see them, despite the fact they belong to you. Now, no matter what you may have heard, the point of the system is not to protect the country from foreign adversaries. Under the Biden administration, we don't even bother to do that anymore. No. The point of this system is to take power from the voters and the officials they elect and hand that power to the permanent bureaucracy in Washington. It's infuriating, and over time it is dangerous. But for once, we can report some meaningful pushback against this regime of secrecy and deceit.